Welcome back to Moose and Loose Extra, my second channel. Today we got Danielle Smith talking with Vassy Kapelos. Vassy Kapelos doing her bad cop thing, kind of grilling her, but really it's Danielle Smith. She's the only one in government, whether it's the Liberal government or the premiers, that's doing the right thing here, the right approach with Donald Trump. She's trying to find a solution. Donald Trump is a deal man. He wants to make a deal. And as we've seen with Colombia yesterday, you can make a deal because Colombia was getting slapped with tariffs after Donald Trump was bringing back all the bad guys to Colombia. You put them in the plane, sent them back. Colombia refused them. Donald Trump said, you're getting tariffs. Colombia then submitted. Canada just needs to secure the border and we can avoid these tariffs. This is the path Danielle Smith is on. She's trying to find the right thing that will appease Donald Trump. Check out this interview where Danielle Smith basically corrects Vassy on why she's defending Alberta's oil. It's not just for Alberta.
Counter, and I know you talked about a proportionate response. Much of the debate has focused on, the sort of nuclear option, that being adding an export tax to energy that we send to the United States, or even blocking that energy altogether. I know that you have argued that it's not logical, and that you would very much oppose that. Steve Verhoeven, who was our negotiator during the initial round of renegotiating NAFTA, essentially a number of years ago, said that you've undermined Canada's negotiating position this time around. Doesn't he have a point?
I think we have to have a realistic argument. You really shouldn't threaten to do things that you can't do. And when you think about the potential, if the Americans took the same viewpoint, that they were going to cut off energy exports into Eastern Canada, that would be absolutely devastating, because the vast majority of the gasoline and energy products that Eastern Canada gets come by way of the United States. So I don't think that that's a productive way to engage in the discussion. What I would
Exactly. So the oil comes down from Alberta, it goes into Michigan, then comes back up into Ontario and Quebec. If we tariff them, or if we cut off oil, it's cutting off the rest of Canada, or they can tariff it coming back into Canada. As she said, it's not a logical thing you can do. Unless we had Energy East Pipeline, then we wouldn't have any problem with it. We could do that. Once again, though, that was shut down all because of Trudeau.
Would prefer for us to have a proportionate response, absolutely. But then let's start working on ways to get back to that tariff-free relationship. You can make that argument from every single provincial perspective. You can make the argument in terms of the costs that are going to go up for American consumers, and I think that's going to be our pressure point. When you look at the members of Congress and the governors, they certainly know that most of them have their principal trade relationship with Canada, and it goes both ways. And so I think leveraging those relationships are going to be able to make the case. If we can get some of those voices standing up and saying this is a bad idea, I think we'll be able to get through whatever tariff war we have, hopefully fast, hopefully avoid it altogether.
What's striking to me, though, is how silent they all are. Nobody is coming to our defense. Nobody appears to be advocating for us on the inner circle of Trump at the moment. And that wasn't necessarily the case 6 or 7 or 8 years ago. And so I'll ask again, I do get the logistics of what you're saying, and maybe it doesn't end up being something that can necessarily come to fruition. But why would we come to a fight with the thing that we have the most leverage with, like one arm tied behind us? Like, what is the point of taking that off the table? And are you doing that just to advance your own political interest domestically?
You essentially don't have that on the table. As she mentioned, if we tariff the heck out of them, they're going to cut off our own oil to our own people. It's like taking out your own leg. It's not only like going to the negotiation with one arm behind your back, it's like taking out your own leg.
Well, Albertans don't want to see another equalization program. Let's be very clear about what an export tariff is. It means putting a tax on Canadian goods so that all the dollars go to Ottawa, so that Ottawa can use those dollars to redistribute to other provinces. And we've seen that newsreel before. We saw it with the way equalization works, but more in our history, the way Pierre Trudeau dealt with our province, and it created national unity problems. This is not a time that while we're having a fight with our biggest trading partner, that we also have a fight with each other. I would say let's focus on the things that we can agree on together. Let's take a Team Canada approach. Let's maybe get the Energy East pipeline back on the rails so that our Eastern Canadian friends don't have to rely on the U.S. for this vital fuel. Let's talk about more ways to get pipelines to the West Coast so that we can diversify our markets and be able to support our friends in Japan and Korea and elsewhere. I think
Danielle Smith is the only one out of the government and the premiers that's speaking with common sense right now.
I think that that's a more constructive conversation to have. If we're going to have this temporary or maybe even more permanent problem with our U.S. partner, we've got to be looking at new markets, and we would be far better off working together rather than putting forward policies that are only going to divide us.
And look, I've asked the federal government on I don't even know how many occasions over the last number of years about those extra markets and building capacity to them. But even putting that aside for a moment, we're in the moment we're in. I've also asked ministers in the past week if they would do the same thing that people are threatening over oil with auto exports, which would have a equally proportionate impact on Ontario. And they said yes. Like they're not making it a national unity crisis, aren't you?
I don't think that will happen, first of all. And second of all,
but they're not taking it off the table. That's the point, right? Maybe logistically, like you say, both are not really great options, but they're not saying, no, I would never do that.
Well, I think the problem that we saw is that we were getting together as a group of premiers and the prime minister saying, let's not negotiate this in public. And I did my part saying, let's focus on the things that we know the Americans care about, national security and border security. And everybody else went off freelancing. And the thing they kept returning to was punishing Alberta and punishing energy. So I just...
Exactly. They didn't focus on what the real problem is. If they went and said, here's $1 billion and actually did something with it, actually showed boots on the ground. Hey, we got new scanners at all the border crossings in British Columbia where all the street fennel comes in, and show, hey, we're getting all this off the streets. We exposed all these labs. We're shutting them down. We're arresting these people. We're putting them in jail. But the problem is in Trudeau's Canada, all these criminals don't go to jail. They get let out of jail and they commit more crimes. Trump sees that. He sees how much of a disaster it is up here.
Just wanted to make sure now we get back to talking about the things that unite us rather than divide us. And so Albertans are just simply not going to accept an export tax on this product. They're not going to accept the federal government blocking the export of this vital product. And I don't think that demonstrates to the Americans that we are a reliable trading partner, which is what we are trying to do. Let's find new markets. 100% on board with that. Now that we've got Trans Mountain, we have the ability to not only increase the amount that goes through that pipe, but also find new markets with it. Right now, most of it is going to the United States on the West Coast. Maybe we should start signing deals with India, with Spain, and with other jurisdictions. So I think that's...
So here's Trans Mountain from Edmonton, goes over to Vancouver. That's what she's talking about. Then this allows us to export this to other countries. We should be doing that. Why not diversify our country so we're not so reliant on just America?
That's a far more constructive way for us to talk about how we can work together as a country. Same with all of our critical minerals. I mean, Saskatchewan provides 20% of the world's supply of uranium. You've heard David Eby talk about germanium being one of the key products that they have up in Northwest Territories. They have an immense opportunity on lithium. Those can go anywhere. Those can go on a rail car, those can go on a ship, and those can go anywhere around the world. And everybody wants them. So why don't we talk about ways we can support each other on finding them?
Unfortunately, in Justin Trudeau's Canada, mining is not allowed. Only green EV companies that are owned by friends of Justin Trudeau, Mark Carney, are allowed. Money laundering.
Those new markets. I think it's a far more a constructive way of approaching it.
Just one final question. I mean, to your point, the federal government bought TMX. The reason that oil is getting elsewhere is because the federal government used not just Albertans' taxpayer dollars, but taxpayer dollars from across the country so that the entire country could benefit it. Wouldn't that be the same approach, looking to take, just leaving the specter of what can happen with oil exports on the table? Once again, like, instead of demonstrating, the disparity and stuff like that, wouldn't we be demonstrating that we're not willing to be walked all over?
I think that TMX provides the exact example of why we need more of that kind of pipeline infrastructure, so that we can have more markets, so that we have more control over our own destiny, so that we can reduce the differential, because we're not facing gluts of one product only going to one customer. And in fact, I wish we'd been able to build Energy East and Northern Gateway. I wish we'd been able to build more natural gas pipelines. But I think that TMX offers a prime example of how the entire country can benefit when we work together on those kinds of nation-building infrastructure projects. So I'd like to see...
I mean, you look at the equalization payments, TMX getting built after Alberta pays so much every single year to fund the rest of the country. You can't really argue against Alberta shaking the finger at Alberta. It's like, come on. It's like having a rich uncle who keeps paying for everything, and then you're scolding the rich uncle for paying for everything.
See more of that.
Then why are you pitting Alberta against the rest of the country in this instance? The rest of the country helped out with TMX to...
She didn't like that. You see that little head twist? She's like, what did you just say?
benefit Albertans and everyone.
Well, then let's benefit from it. Let's make sure that we get the highest value for our product internationally, because we have more customers to sell it to. I think people need to learn the right lesson out of what happened with that. We had 125 billion projects in Alberta canceled because of the uncertainty that happened in the regulatory environment. We could have been so much further ahead, but the fact that Coastal GasLink got built and we're about to do LNG export, that TMX finally got built, and it's had a major impact on that differential. Those are two success stories, and we should build on that. We should do more of that.
Danielle Smith, very diplomatic here. Vassie's last question there, a little bit nasty. Really, this all falls on Justin Trudeau's shoulders. He's destroyed our country. We need to get rid of this buffoon ASAP. We don't need carbon tax, Carney, or all these other loser liberals. They're all going to be done after the election. It's so insane that we have all these people that are just clinging to power. They're all going to get wiped out. You're going to have like a few of them left. There'll basically be almost no resemblance of liberals in the House of Commons come after the election. I think what we can take from these recent events is what's happened in Colombia there. There is really a way to get off these tariffs with Donald Trump. We just have to solve the problem that he was originally complaining about. I don't see this happening though, because it seems very much like a political strategy that Team Trudeau Carney are pushing on to try to get more liberal support, because they know a lot of Canadians are scared of Donald Trump and what he might bring to Canada. Once again, more dirty politics that puts Canadians last.